Typical scenario when somebody's murdered in broad daylight and they have like, $100 million organization behind them, it's common sense that you should check the people that work at that organization. Like that's like the first people that you should begin to investigate.
It's those little things where, again, he would walk through the door, drop his bags, daddy's home, take his phone.
Old photo that came out in 2019 of Erika Kirk with Benjamin Netanyahu's son. Okay, wait.
What if the biggest scandal wasn't about ideology, but about money, power, and allegations that exploded faster than anyone could control? Because right now, social media is flooded with claims that Erika Kirk has been removed from Turning Point USA after accusations surfaced online, alleging she accepted a $2 million bribe from foreign-linked sources. No court filings, no verified financial records, no official statement confirming the number. And yet, the narrative went viral overnight. Screenshots, clips, reaction videos, and captions all began repeating the same explosive idea. Erika wasn't just controversial, she was compromised. Once that framing took hold, everything she had ever said or done started getting reinterpreted through a single lens: influence for sale. Supporters called the story reckless misinformation. Critics called it the missing puzzle piece. And everyone else watched as silence from TPUSA was treated like confirmation. That's how fast things moved. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The internet doesn't wait for proof when a story feels believable. A firing rumor plus a bribe number plus a foreign agent angle is the most combustible mix possible. Once those elements collide, the conversation stops being about verification and starts being about damage control. So the real question isn't just did this happen? It's how did this narrative become accepted before anyone proved anything at all? Because when allegations reach this level, corrections don't undo impact, they just arrive too late. The story didn't begin with documents. It didn't begin with a whistleblower affidavit or a bank record. It began the way many viral political scandals begin today, with fragments. A caption here, a reaction clip there. A number repeated often enough that it started to sound specific and therefore credible. That number was $2 million. Once a rumor attaches a dollar figure, it gains weight. Audiences assume specificity equals sourcing. But in this case, critics quickly pointed out that no verified financial filings, court documents, or public statements have substantiated the claim that Erika Kirk accepted a bribe from any source. What exists instead is a reaction chain built on inference. So where did the claim come from? According to online timelines reconstructed by observers, the first mentions appeared in commentary that framed the allegation as what's being said, not what's been proven. That distinction vanished quickly. Screenshots of those early mentions were reposted without qualifiers. Reaction channels debated the implication. And soon, the claim hardened into a declarative headline. The next accelerant was organizational silence. When audiences believe someone has been fired, they look for confirmation. In this case, the absence of an immediate, detailed response from Turning Point USA became part of the narrative. Silence was interpreted as strategy. Strategy was interpreted as admission. And admission was treated as confirmation. But silence online is ambiguous. Organizations pause for many reasons: legal review, internal process, or simply not wanting to dignify a rumor. The problem is that the internet reads all pauses the same way, as evidence waiting to be uncovered. That's how the fired from TPUSA framing gained traction. No termination letter was shown. No official announcement was cited. Instead, creators relied on absence. The absence of appearances, the absence of posts, the absence of denial. Those absences were stitched together into a conclusion. Another reason the rumor spread so fast was narrative stacking. Earlier controversies involving Erika had already primed audiences to believe there was more beneath the surface. When a new allegation appears that seems to explain everything, skepticism drops. Each prior dispute becomes retroactive proof. Then came the foreign agent angle. Adding an international dimension escalates any story. It invokes national security fears, loyalty questions, and moral panic. But here again, critics emphasized that no filings under foreign agent statutes, no indictments, and no investigative reports have been publicly presented. The claim traveled without those anchors because the story felt plausible to those already convinced something was wrong. Why does this matter? Because plausibility is not proof, yet online plausibility often wins. The mechanics are familiar. A claim is introduced with qualifiers, reactions repeat it without qualifiers, a number gives it weight, silence gives it momentum, repetition gives it authority by the time fact-checkers ask for sources. The audience has already moved on to consequences, debating what the alleged firing means, not whether it happened. Another key factor is algorithmic reinforcement. Once users engage with one clip about the allegation, platforms recommend more. Each recommendation makes the story feel more real. Viewers assume if everyone's talking about it, it must be true. That assumption replaces verification. It's also worth noting how language drift played a role. Alleged acceptance became took money. Removed from duties became fired. Each shift is small, but together they change the story's meaning entirely. At no point did the narrative require evidence to advance. It required only engagement. And engagement came easily because the story hit multiple pressure points at once. Money, politics, foreign influence, and organizational accountability. Each of those topics performs well on its own. Combined, they create a perfect storm. Critics pushing back now argue that this is precisely why restraint matters. Once a claim reaches this level, the harm isn't limited to reputation. It affects careers, safety, and public trust. And correcting it later is exponentially harder than preventing it early. This part of the story isn't about deciding whether the allegation is true or false. It's about understanding how the allegation became dominant without being proven. The internet doesn't require confirmation to proceed. It requires momentum. In the next part, we'll examine why organizational silence gets read as guilt, how firing rumors take hold without documentation, and what actually happens inside groups like TPUSA when controversies erupt online. One of the most misunderstood dynamics in online controversies is silence. When an organization doesn't immediately respond, the internet rarely interprets that pause as neutrality or caution. It interprets it as guilt waiting to be confirmed. That dynamic played a major role in how the narrative around Erika Kirk and Turning Point USA escalated from rumor to assumed outcome. Here's the problem. Silence means different things in different worlds. In real organizations, silence often means legal review, internal assessment, or simply refusing to legitimize an unverified claim. In online culture, silence means something is being hidden. That gap between intention and interpretation is where firing rumors thrive. Once the bribe allegation began circulating, attention immediately shifted to TPUSA's response, or lack of one. There was no press release confirming termination, no announcement detailing disciplinary action, no public statement validating the $2 million claim. Yet, within hours, headlines and captions began using definitive language. Removed, cut ties, fired. How did that leap happen? First, absence becomes evidence. When Erika's public appearances slowed or changed, some viewers treated that as proof of internal consequences. But organizational scheduling changes can happen for dozens of reasons, none of which equal termination. Online, however, reduced visibility often gets interpreted as punishment. Second, language inflation. Early commentary used cautious phrasing like possibly removed or no longer associated. As those phrases traveled, they hardened into fired. This is how rumor language evolves. Qualifiers disappear because they weaken impact. Third, expectation bias. Audiences expected a firing. When a story frames someone as compromised, people assume institutions will respond decisively. If that response isn't visible, viewers fill in the blank with the outcome they believe should have happened. Fourth, organizational reputation. TPUSA is a high-profile group with strong supporters and critics. Any controversy involving it attracts scrutiny. Silence from a well-known organization feels louder than silence from an unknown one because expectations are higher. Another factor is misunderstanding internal processes. Nonprofits and political organizations rarely announce internal personnel changes publicly unless required. Investigations, reviews, or role adjustments often happen quietly. But online audiences expect transparency on a timeline that institutions can't legally or strategically meet. That mismatch fuels speculation. The word fired is especially potent because it implies resolution. It tells the audience the story is over. That closure is psychologically satisfying. Uncertainty is not. So people gravitate toward the interpretation that provides an ending, even if it's unsupported. At no point did the rumor require confirmation to spread. It required only alignment with what people already believed about the situation. For critics, the firing rumor felt like accountability. For supporters, it felt like character assassination. Both sides engaged, and engagement kept the story alive. There's also the issue of third-party amplification. Reaction creators debated whether TPUSA should fire Erika. That hypothetical debate was later reframed by others as evidence that TPUSA had fired her. The distinction between should and did collapsed. This is a common pattern. Hypothetical discussion, right arrow, perceived decisions, silence, assumed confirmation, repetition, right arrow, accepted outcome. None of this requires malicious intent. It requires momentum. Why does this matter so much? Because being labeled fired from a major organization has real-world consequences. It affects credibility, future opportunities, and personal safety. Once that label attaches, walking it back is extremely difficult, even if it was never true. This part of the story isn't about defending institutions or condemning them. It's about recognizing how quickly organizational silence gets weaponized online. Silence becomes a narrative device instead of a neutral pause. In the next part, we'll examine why the foreign agent angle escalated the story, how international framing amplifies fear, and why adding geopolitics makes rumors feel urgent, even without evidence. The moment the phrase "foreign agents" entered the conversation, the story stopped being a workplace controversy and became something far more volatile. It no longer lived in the realm of organizational disputes or personal conduct. It moved into the territory of national loyalty, political fear, and moral panic. And that shift explains why the narrative surrounding Erika Kirk escalated so rapidly. Nothing accelerates a rumor like geopolitics. The allegation didn't change in substance. There were still no documents, no indictments, no confirmed investigations. What changed was the frame. Foreign agents invokes espionage, betrayal, and hidden influence. It triggers an emotional response that bypasses skepticism. People stop asking, "Is this proven?" and start asking, "How could this happen?" That's a crucial shift. Once a story is framed as a national security issue, doubt feels irresponsible. Questioning the claim starts to look like defending the indefensible. That dynamic pressures audiences to accept the narrative quickly, even when evidence is absent. Another reason the angle spread so fast is symbolic shorthand. The phrase doesn't require explanation. It carries decades of cultural meaning. Viewers project their own fears and assumptions onto it. That projection fills in evidentiary gaps without anyone needing to provide facts. Importantly, no public record has been presented showing that Turning Point USA, any government body, or any court has identified Erika as a foreign agent or recipient of illicit funds. Yet the rumor felt complete because the frame itself supplied the drama. The $2 million figure also gained new weight once paired with geopolitics. A large number suggests scale. Scale suggests coordination. Coordination suggests intent. Each inference builds on the last, creating a story arc that feels logical even if it's unsupported. This is how escalation works. Allegation, right arrow, financial number, right arrow, influence, right arrow, foreign involvement, right arrow, urgency. By the time the story reaches the end of that chain, audiences feel they're reacting to crisis, not a rumor. Media incentives amplify this further. Content with an international angle performs better. It attracts broader audiences and stronger emotions. Creators who might hesitate to repeat a domestic rumor feel justified sharing it once it's framed as a matter of public concern. Another factor is moral clarity. Political scandals are messy. Foreign agent narratives are simple. They offer a clear villain and a clear threat. That clarity is emotionally satisfying. It removes ambiguity, which audiences find uncomfortable. But clarity without evidence is dangerous. Once geopolitics enters the picture, corrections become even harder. Disproving a foreign agent claim requires official statements, documentation, and time. Meanwhile, the rumor continues to spread unchecked. Silence from institutions gets reinterpreted as secrecy. Caution gets read as cover-up. This is why the foreign agent frame is so powerful and so harmful. It turns ordinary verification delays into perceived conspiracies. It also raises the personal stakes dramatically. Accusations of foreign influence can lead to harassment, threats, and real-world danger. Yet online, those risks are often ignored because the narrative feels righteous. This part of the story isn't about asserting that the allegation is false or true. It's about understanding why this framing worked. The internet didn't suddenly gain new information. It gained a new lens, one that magnified fear and minimized doubt. In the next and final part, we'll step back and examine what accountability looks like when accusations reach this level, whether corrections can still matter, and how stories like this actually end once attention moves on. By the time allegations reach this level, money, foreign influence, and organizational fallout, the story is no longer moving on facts. It's moving on momentum, and momentum doesn't ask whether something is proven. It asks only whether people are still paying attention. That's the stage this narrative entered once the claims about Erika Kirk being fired from Turning Point USA and allegedly accepting a $2 million bribe began circulating as settled truth. At that point, accountability becomes murky. In theory, accountability should look simple. If an allegation is true, evidence emerges. If it's false, it gets corrected. In reality, neither happens cleanly online. Corrections move slower than accusations. They don't trigger outrage. They don't generate clicks. And by the time they appear, audiences have already emotionally committed to a version of the story. Walking that belief back feels like admitting error, something the internet rarely rewards. This is why many high-stakes allegations never receive a clear ending. They fade, not resolve. For institutions, silence often continues because responding can escalate legal risk or legitimize misinformation. For individuals, speaking can prolong harm rather than end it. The result is a vacuum, and vacuums get filled with speculation. What's left behind is reputational residue. Search results don't distinguish between allegation and proof. Clips circulate without context. Headlines outlive clarifications. Even if nothing is ever substantiated, the association remains. That's the hidden cost of virality. The internet doesn't require conviction to punish. Suspicion is enough. Another uncomfortable truth is that no one is formally responsible for cleaning up the mess. The creators who amplified the claim can move on. Platforms profit from engagement regardless of accuracy. Audiences feel informed even when they're misled. And the person at the center is left carrying a narrative they didn't author. This doesn't mean allegations should never be discussed. It means how they're discussed matters, especially when claims involve criminality, foreign influence, or large sums of money. Those aren't casual accusations, they reshape lives. The question then isn't whether this story was true or false. It's whether the internet is equipped to handle stories of this magnitude responsibly. Because when the stakes are this high, being wrong isn't harmless, it's destructive. And if the truth does eventually surface, whether confirming or debunking the claims, it will arrive in a quieter moment, long after the audience has moved on. That's the paradox. Truth often shows up after virality is gone. By then, the damage is already done. Before you repost the next explosive headline, ask yourself, am I reacting to evidence or to emotion? Would I be comfortable defending this claim if it turned out to be wrong? And if it is wrong, who carries the cost? Because allegations don't disappear when attention fades. They linger in reputations, careers, and personal safety. Drop your thoughts in the comments with responsibility. Share this if you believe truth should matter more than timing. Clicks are temporary, narratives are lasting, and accountability belongs to everyone who helps a story travel.